broadcasting, but if you want to kind of say something like welcome
to PI again, and glad everybody came for the second day. We start with an exciting talk by Guillermo Horta, he's originally from Spain, and he's a trained psychiatrist, child psychiatrist, and came here to do his postdoctoral fellow in the same lab that I was in with Brad Peterson, and has since become a fantastic researcher here, and now working on his K Award and in the Study Darkness division. There's fantastic stuff in schizophrenia, hallucinations, cognitive control, and looking forward to stuff with it.
So thanks everyone, thank you for the introduction, and thanks everyone for inviting me here today. So I want to talk to you today about this application of computational methods to go beyond traditional approaches to analyze fMRI data and learn somewhat more about health and illness. So conventional MRI mapping has typically tried to localize brain responses to external task manipulations, and that we manipulated directly in the task when we saw how the brain reacted to them, for instance, visual stimuli and different memory loads. By extension, many fMRI studies in psychiatry have tried to find abnormal brain regions or brain regions that have abnormal activation in reaction to those manipulations in the task. So we typically try to find a task that targeted that region and see if that region was abnormal in the illness. There's a few implicit assumptions here. Some of them are that regional activations targeted by this task represent basically the main function of the task, which sometimes the only function of the task. And this is in contrast with a lot of physiology data showing that pretty much in every region of the brain there's a lot of functional heterogeneity. But the other assumption is that task reactivity is all the information that we can extract from fMRI experiments. And I think that at least for some type of cognitive processes we can go further. So the use of computational models to analyze fMRI data and also to design particular tasks, I think has the advantage that it tries to uncover computational mechanisms underlying a certain kind of process. So we're not looking at the reactions of the brain to a particular task manipulation, but we're trying to look at signals that represent internal variables that the brain is using to solve the task. And one example of this is the reward prediction signal. By extension, computational psychiatry tries to find abnormal computations in the brain. So what is actually leading to some psychiatric symptoms? What are the patients computing different in their brains that leads to their particular symptoms? This, of course, has also assumptions, and the assumption is that cognitive processes, for instance, the word processing or cue reactivity, can be further dissected into specific variables like the word prediction errors that hopefully correspond to specific biological constants, for instance, basic dopamine release. And one of the advantages of this assumption is that this is typically tested or can be tested within a single study. So what are reward prediction error signals, which are one of these internal variables that I'm talking about? So reward prediction error signals are, as the word says, errors in the prediction of reward. There's been a lot of work in this area, in particular the seminal work by Schultz, showing that dopamine neurons in the midbrain signal deviations from the prediction. So if you see this raster plot, and this is a histogram showing the activity in a particular neuron in the midbrain. And we see that the activity is increased when there's a better than expected outcome. The activity remains the same when the outcome is fully expected, and the activity goes down. There's a transient dip in the activity in those areas when the outcome is worse than expected. Okay? And this happens in a particular period of the task, which is when the outcome is presented or should be presented. In this case, that's if there's an animation of reward, that it happens at the time when the reward is expected. So this is an important point that we can't call every signal a reward prediction error signal. there's a particular profile of neural activity that signal has to fit, so we can call it a reward prediction signal. And it's the following. In this example, we have on the y-axis neural activity, on the x-axis probability of winning $5. And we see that as the outcomes are better and better than expected, so more unexpectedly good, the activity goes up. In this case, we're not expecting reward, but we get reward. As we go to the right, we're expecting reward and we get it. When we have a negative outcome, in this case, losing $5, as this outcome is more and more unexpected, we get more and more negative activity. So there's a specific profile that the signals have to fit, so we can call them a reward prediction signal. Importantly here, you can see that this is not simply a reward signal, because no matter what the outcome is, if we lose $10, if we gain $10, if we gain $1 million, if the outcome is fully expected, we shouldn't expect any change on the baseline signal, which is represented here by the dashed line. So how is this relevant to fMRI or fMRI data analysis? Well, we can use a mathematical model of reinforcement learning. It has the ingredients that are supposed to be happening, behind the scene for the brain to be learning that particular process. One of the key signals, as I said, is prediction error, which is simply the difference between the actual reward and the expected reward in a given trial. And that is a teaching signal that is used to update your expectations, so you learn what to expect, and those expectations are more accurate. So there's a value update. Value is simply the expectation of reward. So that value is updated on each trial, proportional to the magnitude of the prediction errors, and depending on an alpha learning rate parameter. So with this model, we can find the free parameters by fitting it to the behavior of that particular individual, the choice history of the given subject. So we can find the free parameters in the model of the learning rate. But once we have those free parameters, we can just plug them in, and based on the particular presentation of schema and the task, we can reconstruct time series of prediction errors, value signals, all of the internal variables in the model on a trial-by-trial basis. That, to do the fMRI analysis, basically we simply have to convolve with an HRF, regress this against all signals over time, and find the regions that track this internal variable over time. In this particular example, the northwest accountant ventral striatum is tracking the reward prediction errors over time during the learning task. And this makes sense biologically because we know that in the northwest accountant, it's one of the main target regions of the dopamine projection from the midbrain. And this has been replicated thousands of times at this point. So now I want to talk about two specific examples of our work in this area, that is computational modeling to analyze brain signals, fMRI. One of them is a study of learning-dependent plasticity for changes in connectivity during reward learning in healthy individuals. The other one is a clinical application where we apply the same principles to study sensory learning and schizophrenia and see if this relates to the hallucinations that patients have. So in the first example, we used a virtual reality task where patients were navigating this virtual maze, and they were supposed to learn the associations between lit arms and rewards. And basically, the unlit arms didn't give any rewards, and the lit arms were associated with rewards once you entered the lit arm. So applying this computational model of learning, a very similar model to the one that I just showed, we were able to replicate these patients had reward prediction error signals in parts of the ventral striatum here. But also that the patients also showed value signals in some other regions of the striatum. This, again, the value signals mean just the updating of the expectations of rewards. So when you're seeing lit arm and you're learning your expected reward as you're learning that as the future. We also saw that value signals were stronger in participants who actually learned the association compared to those who didn't. But we were here particularly interested in, it says this particular model. It says that the connections between sensory cortex and motor cortex to the striatum are the ones that are strengthened as you're learning the association between sensory cues and the optimal motor actions that will lead to reward. In particular, as learning progresses and you have more prediction errors and basic dopamine release, the effect of dopamine is basically to strengthen the connections between sensory inputs to the striatum and striatal outputs to the motor cortex. So we tested this using a psychophysiological interaction. We took the betaine seed in this region that differ from the two groups of learners and non-learners, and saw whether the connections brain-wide to that particular part of the striatum strengthened as a function of learning, particularly as a function of value learning. So we did see that learners increased their connectivity to the putamen from premotor, SMA, motor regions, and also sensory association cortices, parietal, occipital, and temporal regions. And then this was also different between learners and non-learners, supporting the theory that this connectivity underlies the association between sensory cues and optimal actions. This is an example of clinical application of this mode-based optimization. In this example, we used the predictive coding model, which basically applies the same principle. It processes that sensory systems use the same rules that apply for the reward systems, and we are constantly learning that our sensory cortices are basically signal deviations from the expected regularity. In the context of patients, we wanted to see whether there was a deficit in this system that could explain the abnormal activation that we see in the auditory cortex when patients are having auditory hallucinations. Because we can think of this system as a system that based on predictions attenuates neural activity. So if the attenuates neural activity is predictable. So if it's not working well, we would have normal activation in the absence of stimuli. It could explain why people are hallucinating. So first of all, we wanted to have some evidence that this is going on in healthy people and in patients with schizophrenia. This is an example for one individual. We tested two different models. This one here would be the default model or the feature detection model, where we just divided stimuli into speech stimuli and blank stimuli, which were stimuli with no speech and non-speech stimuli was presented. Let me backtrack for a moment. This is a task, this is a speech discrimination task, where stimuli of speech, non-speech, or no stimuli were presented in a probabilistic manner. So here we're just looking at the activation to any speech stimulus or any blank stimulus. We see that this part of the auditory cortex is responding more strongly to speech. That's true. But we do have substantial variability here, and these are, each data point is one trial, this is for one subject, and all this variability is not accounted for. When we applied the computational model of predictive coding to analyze the same data in the same subject, we can see that the activity in the auditory cortex is much better represented as a sensory prediction. What I mean by that is that more unexpected speech activated more the auditory cortex, more unexpected emission of speech deactivated more the auditory cortex, and no matter what the outcome was, if it was expected, the activation was very close to the baseline, fitting with the specific profile that was defined before. So we saw that this was true both for patients and controls. These are the group average maps. And the bilateral regions of the auditory cortex responded as a sensory prediction error during the task. But then in patients, there was weaker prediction error signals than some portion of the auditory cortex.
Just to follow this, so the So the person is given some kind of cue that lets them know that they may or may not be doing something, so that they are in a state of expecting to hear something?
Not in this case. In this task, it was a very simple speech discrimination task. You can hear speech sometimes, or non-speech stimuli. Sometimes you don't hear anything. And simply the base rate of the stimuli was changed in different parts of the task. So in certain parts of the task, the probability of hearing speech is very high. You might hear a bunch of speech stimuli. Some other parts of the task is very infrequent, and it's very systematic.
So I don't know, maybe if everyone else gets this is not a question, but so I don't understand why you would call it a prediction error if the subject isn't given anything to predict.
Because this is an implicit system. This is, like theory says, and the results are compatible with this, precisely because this is a task that they're not supposed to predict anything. This is just going on by default in the sensory cortices. This is how they work, and there's some work in animals showing also that particularly deviations from regularities, you're not supposed to be learning, you're not told to learn, are what activates mostly the sensory cortex. So there was this deficit in sensory prediction error signals in the auditory cortex. So we wanted to see whether this was truly related to the abnormal increase in activation in the absence of stimuli. So we looked at the average activation during the time trials when most stimulus was presented, and we were able to see that the weaker prediction error signals across all participants, the more strongly activated were auditory regions in this blind trials in the absence of stimuli. This negative correlation. We saw this in the right auditory cortex and the left auditory cortex. This the axial view shows in the also once analysis this negative correlation. So finally, we wanted to see that this was truly related to hallucinations. We saw that within patients, the weaker prediction errors in this part of the auditory cortex within this regions with sensory prediction errors, the weaker the prediction errors and the stronger the activation in the absence of stimuli, the more severe hallucinations. So as a summary, computational approaches to fMRI afford insights into how the brain is solving tasks rather than finding regions that are responding or reacting to the task. They permit a more precise functional characterization of activations and, in some instances, connectivity, brain tasks by using specific mathematical models of learning and cognition and testing them and comparing between them. And finally, computational psychiatry seeks to uncover abnormal computations in illness, which may help in finding more function-specific treatments, because ultimately we want to fix dysfunctions in mental illness, not necessarily fix regions. So thanks to all of you. This is a list of mentors, collaborators, and colleagues from here from my division of translational imaging. Some other colleagues from the medical center and other institutions, and my clinic sources. Do you have any questions?
Assess after the scan the extent to which the schizophrenic patients were having auditory hallucinations?
I didn't get into the details of the design, but actually, basically on each trial, the only question they were asked, this is a temporal sparse sampling design. So basically, stimulus was presented, some volumes were required, and right after that, they were asked whether they heard speech or not in that trial. On each trial, they were asked the same question. So basically, we could control the stimulus we're presenting, and then we were asking about the percept. So in some of the trials, we knew that nothing was presented, but we selected patients with very frequent hallucinations. So in some of the trials, they were actually saying that they were hearing speech, when we knew there was nothing presented. This is basically the definition of hallucination. So we could quantify how many hallucination events they had during the task. And right after the scanning session, did a post-scanning briefing, and I asked them if they have had hallucinations during the scanning period. And it actually matched pretty well. The frequency of hallucinations they reported and the number of hallucination trials based on this definition matched pretty well.
Did that correlate with the level of activation in auditory cortex, whether they were or not reporting something in the absence of stimuli?
Yeah, but for this analysis, I excluded the hallucination trials, so it wasn't a outcome.
Because part of the reason I'm asking, and this is something I wanted to talk to everybody more about, is this whole question of what are people actually experiencing in the scan or during the resting state. And if there was some signal that you could track, let's say an auditory cortex, like I have the hypothesis that maybe if you're lying in the scanner and there's this constant noise, and then you go into some self-generated thought, if there's some change in auditory cortexes, you're sort of filtering out the noise, if that could be some indicator of an internal process versus external perception. So I was interested if these findings kind of relate to that.
Yeah, so actually, it's funny that you mentioned that because one of my, initial aims with this task was actually to develop a classifier that could detect when people were hallucinating. So I have some data showing that that's possible, and then in the following different tasks I was presented speech stimuli, try to see if the classifier could detect when people were doing speech. So things like that could be done definitely and applied to a resting state scan to try to detect changes in states. And we're just talking about a recent paper in here that was basically trying to detect when people were falling asleep during a resting state scan with the same principle, just developing a classifier that control before speaking.
There's been a lot of interest in trying to do that, to try to see if you can predict what people are thinking about. And so one of the things that has been used quite a bit. So there's the being able to predict from the brain data. One of the problems with that is you're limited by your training set. And so if you want to predict everything somebody's likely to be doing while they're in a resting state, then you have to have data where they're actually doing those things so that you can train a classifier to do it. So then that becomes kind of difficult. That's a difficult problem.
The typical brain decoding experiment.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have patients or participants looking at different stimuli for 5 hours.
Yeah.
They have a large amount of data set
Right.
that they can decode that.
I tried to do an emotion predictor. I wanted to do a mood ring from the scanner to be able to predict people's whether they're positive or negative mood. And so the biggest issue there is, well, how do you induce mood reliably in the scanner and equally across individuals? So that's huge, right? I mean, there's only so many times you can kill their dog, right? I mean, it's and so we tried with like videos and we got no signal, but it's exactly the goal was to do that is can you see people go in and out of like negative moods? And then maybe if you take somebody that's depressed, you would see if you look at the resting state scan that they spent more time in a negative mood than somebody that's not depressed. It was kind of the idea, but it never really worked out. So the other approach is so people like Johnny Smallwood, who works a lot with Daniel Margulies, they'll do thought probes. And so they'll ask questions at the end of a resting state scan and say, how much of this time do you spend thinking about something that happened in the past or something that happened in the future or will happen in the future? And they have all these different questions. And so we worked on a paper, or we have a paper where we actually then look at the correlates of that in that data and to see it. And that's sort of the other way of going about it.
And that's what we do. Basically ask a question, different questions right after the resting state scan and basically have them read in addition.
Right. Yeah. Right. How often they heard hallucinations during it.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah.
Go back to the slide that's right around
Sure. I'm imagining we're going to be earlier today. So we'll see what happens, but 2-3. Okay.
So I was wondering, and maybe this isn't
You're asking a question.
Oh, really? I wasn't being So, is there the condition? Are you showing the condition of where they were before you were presented with any stimuli? Or no, that's not in the baseline?
That's very good question.
So we're looking at learners versus non-learners.
Yeah.
But are we comparing where they were before, or that is with its intra-subject? Can you tell me again how you designed this, please?
The task. Basically,
The analysis.
in the analysis, once you fit the model into the behavior of the participant, you have an idea of how the observed learning curve is
Relative to their baseline?
Yeah, and from 0 when they don't know anything about the task until they totally figure it out, or they're pretty close to figuring it out. So you have some specific time series of the value they assign to the lip arms, how that's grown over time. Okay, so then you can look at, in this case, you can see whether, it's similar to a seed connectivity analysis, you can look at the regions that are correlated to the activity in the container. You can also look at the regions that change the connectivity with the container as that value function is growing over time. And in this case, it's a fairly monotonic function that we control for a totally linear function. So this is not just simply activity that was growing linear, or connectivity that was increasing linear. It was particularly increasing with the function of the value signals that they were updated over time for the particular subject.
Anybody else? So, really appreciate that. I mean, that's one of the one of the things that we were talking about, with Nature Talk. We really wanted to emphasize is kind of the degree to which we need collaboration amongst different expertises in order to be able to really do this. Because a lot of the computational modeling that we get into is very sophisticated, and not all of us have the skill sets in order to do it. So there's a lot of opportunity for people that are more computation minded to help out people that are much more cognitively minded in order to be able to do this. Cognitively minded versus computation. Is that a false dichotomy? Psychological, I guess. I don't know what psychology means anymore, to be honest with you.
I think it's like the epitome of being comfortable with uncertainty.
Psychology?
Yeah, or psychology. So like, I agree. I'm not on my English or.
That's fine. I'm sure that they're happy that you're not at mind brain distinction.
But I still think what's fascinating about psychologists and psychiatrists who go to science or science people who go into psychiatric and psychological questions is that we're taking the ones that are real precision in science and comfort and uncertainty. Going across the spectrum.
So what's appealing about it to you? Dealing with that uncertainty.
Well, I think the uncertainty is real.
Right.
And it's the ultimate challenge to try to blaze a trail.
This paper. This paper.
But for a really good reason.
Is that why that? I've noticed that a lot of psychologists think that's not part of it.
No.
Is that the point?
This is not true.
That was a joke.
One more comment I have regarding what you said is that, well, first of all, I don't have strong computational skills, but some of the models that I'm using are, fairly simple. We just learn about the method, which is just one more skill in analysis. But the other thing that I did mention is that a lot of times you don't even have to fit a computational model to the behavior. And what you can do is design a task that with the model in mind that is going to allow you to manipulate exactly what you want, so you don't have to use a computer model. There's some hybrid in between those two. So now it's talking about, and I think that it's like designing the task, with model in mind.
Can you give an example of one that's honestly an implicit model in the task?
Well, for instance, in a lot of the your economic tasks, when you're given, an explicit lottery that, you're told your probability of winning $5 is 25%, and you're told that you're winning $0 is 75%. In that case, the expected value is known, it's explicit, and the prediction error can be calculated in the ISIS form as just a subtraction between what you actually see and the average, or the weighted average of those two probabilities and those two possible outcomes. So a lot of the neuroeconomic tasks, for instance, are based on this model. They don't necessarily have to fit a model to the task. I think it's good to for this. The good thing about this model is that it's very specific. So you know that at the outcome period, you're having a reward prediction error signal that it's not going to happen before that. Like you really need the outcome to have a prediction error. And value signals, for instance, are going to happen before the outcome. So you have like sub-trial resolution of different events. And I have experience with other FMI tasks, and I've been very disappointed because it's not good, reliable applications to them. And since I started working on this type of tasks, I think that the results are a lot more reliable.
So,
Yeah.
so remember we started off with this common and I think prediction as something to be derived from thinking about the first pattern. How do you take the results of this and connect it back to what we were asking initially?
Well, I don't think that we're necessarily asking that question of like what's going on with the dopamine signals. So I think that the dopamine part is good because we have a very complete, biological substrate for reward prediction errors. So that's pretty well known. So we're not just, making up a signal. When you, for instance, take a task where you have wins and losses and just create a contrast between wins and losses. But what the hell does that mean? Is there any brain region that is actually responding to that specifically?
Yeah.
Like, you don't know. Is that related to dopamine release? You don't know. You're just interested in that, and maybe you don't have a good model, or you don't know about good models. And then you're just asking that question because it's convenient and because it's what you're actually manipulating the task. But I think the most interesting question that you can ask with this type of approach is what's exactly wrong in that brain, or you can first validate the model with an fMRI experiment. So if you find like very good neural correlates of reward prediction errors and value signals and whatever other variable the model has, you're validating the model actually. But then you can apply that in psychiatry, for instance, and say, of those variables that are important to make a decision or to learn something, what is actually the one that is wrong in patients? And once you know that, if you know, you can go back and say, okay, we think that this is related to physical release. Is it true that there's a abnormality in physical release? Or might not have to do anything with the release.
It's like when you said that it's based on measures like this, and
Yeah, exactly.
so what do you want us to think about?
Good question.
So, are most of you interested in resting state? I know that you're mostly interested in resting state. Connectivity. I actually don't know. Well, one of the implications of this to that type of resting state is that eventually, even if you're interested in seeing what type of mental states the person has at rest, it could probably be useful to have a good model of what are the computations underlying, for instance, picture thinking or memory retrieval. I think that in general, the better you know what are the variables that you can dissect any process into. For instance, memory retrieval has this component. Because if, for instance, you wanted to see when people are retrieving the memory at the resting scans, if you have a particular sequence of events that you can detect, and you know that always happens when you're retrieving memories, maybe it's a little more specific, so more confidence that that person is doing that exactly best. But other than that, I don't know that it has such super specific applications to resting state analysis.
It builds on what I was talking about today. We were saying that the default mode, the resting state networks, Maggie asked that they be related to some sort of psychological concepts that psychological processes that we already have lots of literature about. Kind of went off that topic.
And they do.
Yeah.
For instance, I mostly focus on task-based fMRI, and I understand that a lot of people are disappointed with it and will try to do something else that is more reliable. And I see that resting state definitely probably more reliable, probably has more potential for clinical applications, in clinical settings. But there's like two literatures that barely talk to each other, which is weird. Because for instance, the full mode network, I disagree with that term. I think it's a really bad term name for it. One of the things is that it plays a very active role in memory retrieval, and that's very, very well known. Like there's studies of connectivity with ECOG in implanted patients, where they're showing that the connections between different parts of the default mode play a very important role in retrieving memory from the campus. But also all of these neuroeconomic studies show that some of the main regions that encode value are actually default mode network regions. I don't know if I would call that, I'm not talking about connectivity studies, but those regions play a very active role in making decisions, in retrieving memories. I don't even know what they're called. When you're doing a kind of task and then you're in the rest period.
Spontaneous thought.
But I think also it depends on, but it depends on sort of what associations a person has with that term, default. Because I think for those people who encounter the term and associated that in their mind with task negative, they might have that reaction. But I think from a psychological point of view, the thing that we are doing most of the time by default is accessing memory and predicting the future, which is very similar substrates. And we're constantly assessing value. So I think for me, those processes are still well subsumed under the default, though it also has this sense of like idling, the thing that you do when you're not doing it, which I think is a real, that's a...
The most brilliant thing that early biologists did was use Latin terms that nobody knows what they mean to name things. The most ridiculous thing that we do now is use words that have meaning and carry baggage with it to name things. And that's gotten us into so much trouble with resting state, with default networks, with a lot of these different things that we are. It's much easier. It's much easier for us to be flexible about what we expect of the function of the brain region to be if we call it horse shape or almond shaped than we are if we, like the amygdala, if somebody called it the fear part of the brain,
Right.
we'd be effed, right? I mean, and it's similar, it's like with the, like think about oncogenes, right? Oncogenes. Like how many oncogenes have functions that are completely unrelated to cancer? Pretty much all of them, right? But we call them like CFOS, right? I think cancer is in the name of it, right? And it's just like, well, but that's involved in brain plasticity, right? But we've labeled it a cancer gene. And so, but so like the default network, and one of the biggest issues I have in terms of like what you were saying about how these regions are associated, so you cannot figure out how the brain works using resting state. Right? I mean, you have no control. You don't know what's going on internally or externally in that situation. Well, you kind of know what's going on externally, but you don't know what's going on internally. It's very useful in terms of coming up with things like correlates of phenotype, right? It's very useful clinically because it's simple, it's easy, it's cheap, right? And pretty reliable. But you're not going to, so the beauty of the computational stuff is not only are you saying, you're able to approach the question of how, right? So yeah, this, with resting state, you may be able to say, okay, well somehow the relationship between the ventral striatum and medial prefrontal cortex, for example, may be messed up in schizophrenia, but the more probative techniques, the task-based techniques, allow you to answer the question. And the truth of the matter is resting state always will be a net that you cast. And, it's some way where you can identify regions of the brain that seem to be behaving differently in one group compared to another, and then you have to go back and use more probative techniques in order to be able to understand it. Another frustrating thing about the default network is that it is, all of the things that we say about the default network are things that we associate, it's more like phenomenology, right? It's like, people say that the default network is hyperactive in people with depression, therefore we think it's related to depressive mood and depression. People, it's like associated with mind wandering because when you're doing spontaneous activity, it's in a network that you perceive as active, right? But it's, and Randy Buckner's done a lot of good work. Some people have done a lot of good work in terms of actually identifying tasks that activate those regions and say, no, it's not the default network, it's a memory retrieval network, a future planning network, a spatial navigation network, a moral decision-making network, right? And doing all those things, and it's all those things. But I mean, a lot of my work is actually trying to figure that out. It's like, typically, what does it mean that your default network is hyperactive, right? Let's prove it instead of just saying guilt by association. Well, it's hyperactive in people with ADHD, so therefore it must be due to it must indicate attentional lapses.
One good example is the Sailor's network, right? I think that in the first paper that they coined that term, they actually didn't have any task or behavior to correlate it with other than a measure of anxiety severity. And based on the fact that those regions were correlated with severity of anxiety, they decided to call it the Sailor's network, which doesn't make sense. Yeah, you actually showed me that paper really carefully. I mean, they were like differentiating it from executive network that was more correlated with performance and working on the task, something like that. But it's interesting that I think that name is relatively good for that network because computational studies have then showed that part of the insula and the inclusion actually encode some sort of absolute prediction error that a lot of people call salience signal. So it might be a good name after all, but yeah, I'm sure that those regions are doing other stuff.
Why don't we just use proper names?
So
like
The Guillermo network?
Grandma network. Well, we don't want to name them after people. That's what. Yeah, it's like whatever. It's Victor. Here's Victor. Victor's involved in salience. Because people try to interpret these things, and how can you fault them? I mean, this is the whole thing, the schism that happened in 2005 when the resting state became cognitively relevant based on the work at WashU when they established the link. Well, they didn't do it, but anyway, when they popularized using the default network and using resting state to try to understand cognition. Before that, it was very much only exclusively used clinically or by physicists, right? And so at that time, though, people really started saying, "Oh, well, the resting state, that's ridiculous. It's not a resting state." If you tell a psychologist that someone's at rest, they quickly point out all the reasons why you're full of crap. But you always got to go back to the fact that if you go to a neurologist, if you go to a neuroradiologist and you order a resting state scan on a patient, they know exactly what to do. You stick them in the scanner and tell them not to do anything. And clinically, that's been a term that's been used over and over and over and over again. And it makes a lot of sense there. It makes a lot of sense that they attribute it. And now if you talk to Bob Biswell about it, he gets really upset. Because, this is the terminology that he used for so long and it's been so controversial. Because now people say, "Oh, well, it's spontaneous activity." It's not resting state activity. It's spontaneous activity. It's not resting state connectivity. It's intrinsic connectivity.
And what does he get upset about specifically?
The terminology.
And he thinks that that people are using.
He thinks it doesn't matter. He thinks people are taking it too literally, I think.
Oh, okay.
But the problem is you're using words that have meaning. But it's, I guess the issue of is resting state capitalized or not? Right? And when I say to you resting state, I don't capitalize those letters. But in the case of resting state connectivity, resting state is proper noun. It's not, you don't interpret those words, in terms of a state that involves rest. Right? No, that's wrong. It's resting state as in proper noun. Bob.
So, do you, as we've been thinking about this, do you think that there's an even better word than either resting state or intrinsic?
No, I think that it's ridiculous to even waste our time debating these things because they have it's just a vacuous conversation that makes people feel self-important. It's really what it is. It's just, somebody could sit there and argue with you day in and day out about how you're a fool because you use that term to mean something that you obviously know nothing about. I've never, claimed to be a cognitive neuroscientist, and I've never claimed that I was studying cognition in essence.
I'm curious, what do you think about just the term network? Do you think that network is a valid term?
No. And I think it's not because when we use the term network, people try to apply network theory to it. When we talk about functional connectivity networks, it's a statistical dependency between brain regions. They're active at the same time and not active at the same time. There's no flow of information between those regions that we're measuring. There may very well be flow between those regions, but we have no way of knowing that based on the metrics we use. We're observing that two things are doing that at the same time, which makes us think that they're either responding to the same stimuli or somehow responding to one another. But for some reason, we think that they're, But if it's the same thing, if every time you step on a pedal, you hear a squeal, you associate those two things with one another, right? But that doesn't mean there's actually a connection between those two things. Doesn't mean electricity goes from the pedal to the squeal, right? And so I don't like network for that reason. If you look at like graph theory analysis, I'll score makes this quite often, but packling from a functional connectivity, that makes absolutely no sense. If you have A is correlated with B and B is correlated with C, that doesn't mean that information can travel between A and C. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that A and C are actually functionally connected either, right? If A and C are functionally connected, then A and C would be correlated. But they're not functionally connected, right? So a lot of those different things, and I think that it's just and this is actually a big problem, and I think it may be actually extremely relevant for that brain hack, is because this is a big issue when you start talking about collaborating across disciplinary lines. Because people interpret your terminology in a different way. They don't appreciate that you're using a proper noun because when they see it and they read it, the brain processes the word. Okay, resting state, they mean the person's at rest. They don't necessarily think, this is a specific term that has a specific definition. But if we had used the Latin term, then they would have had to look at it, but then you'd be better off. But so when you call it a network, then you get somebody who's a physicist that uses complex like, for example, Danny Bassett, who won a MacArthur Genius Grant. She's a very smart woman. But a lot of the techniques that she applies, I don't think are appropriate to apply to resting state networks, quote unquote networks. And I think she actually applies them mostly to DTI, so she's pretty all right, right? But the thing is if you say the word network to somebody who's a physicist that studies complex network theory, they have a whole bunch of things that they can tell you about networks, and they're excited to tell you about it. But the thing is you're not talking about a network that meets her definition of what a network is, or their definition of what a network is, right? It's not nodes connected by wires. It's a graph with edges that represent statistical dependency. It's much more, so calling it a Markov graph.
Yeah, but what makes it network is that your example is true. It's not that if you enter in a room, then something rings and this thing ends up connected. And then if I go out and then something stops ringing and I enter in, it rings again and I go out and it doesn't. This is why we're calling that network, because there is something like a statistical dependencies between two brain regions that kind of it's synthesis, but on and off altogether.
It doesn't matter how many times you observe it. It doesn't make it any more connected.
Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, we have no evidence to say the opposite. I mean, we are closer.
Oh, and I'm not arguing the opposite. I'm not arguing the opposite.
We are closer to the idea that that's a network.
No, we're actually not. The thing is we're not any closer either way. We're right. We know little about either case, right? I mean, I'm not calculating. I don't know the exact odds, but I would imagine that the odds are probably 50-50 that they're connected. We got to enumerate all of the different things. Right? But if you consistently see it, then I would say, yeah, you're right. There's a consistent phenomenon. There's some way that functionally these things are interrelated. Right? There's something meaningful about the fact, right? But when you talk about a network, think about a computer network where you have information that travels from point A to point B, and it can go through point B to get from point A to point C, right? That's not what a functional connectivity pattern is. But that's what I'm saying is, but a network is a series of tubes that carry information, right? We don't know that about functional connectivity. So so I agree with you. I mean, it could be, right? But we don't know that. So why do we automatically assume it? Why don't we just use something like connectivity pattern and then say it could be a network and it could not be a network, and once we've proven it to be a network, call it a network?
I disagree. The term network, without function,
Look up network.
But also, doesn't even the word.
These words have definitions.
Right.
The reason we have language is to convey information. Words have definitions. If you want to redefine the word, make it a proper noun, use a Latin term for it, we're good.
I was thinking about the net.
But I guess that's my point. It's just that the imprecise terminology is what I don't like about it.
Well, I see this from the other side. I think that the word network really fits and describes what a network is, and I'm not gonna say anything about it. But I think that it's just that we have to do more to understand what the two is. But I'm looking for a two. I'm not looking for a non-two. I'm looking to connect. I'm researching. I'm looking for something that will actually also connect A and B, and A, B, and C, and then maybe A and C.
So if you have a
DTI
connectome, if you have a DTI connectome, much more likely to be a network, right? My criticism is specifically about how we observe, how we define, how we infer a functional connectivity pattern. That's my criticism. That we have no idea how those things are connected. We don't know how many synapses are between them. We don't know all of this information.
Yeah, that's totally true. At the same time, there's another criticism that, well, if I have white matters, fibers between A and B, A and C, and A and B, this doesn't mean it's a network, right?
No,
so I need both. I need somebody that is studying the networks from the functional perspective, and that is doing what I do, like A and B are functionally connected based dependency, and somebody else that will do okay, but there is also a white matter. And then I can say that's a network, that's true. But I will not step back from looking at the functional dependency.
I'm not, no. And I'm not suggesting you do. I'm just saying, and I use the word network to mean it, right? But I don't think it's a good term. And it's network with a capital N, right? It's not network with a lowercase. It's not, so we gotta, but this is just the issue is that, in terms of collaborating, in terms of projecting our knowledge onto other people in other domains, we have to be very sensitive to the fact that in some domains, words that we use and we throw around very casually to mean something very non-specific, right? To mean something that's extremely abstract, aren't abstract in other fields at all. And resting state was an example in two fields that are very close to one another, psychiatry and psychology, right? Clinical neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience, right? Between those two areas, there's very little, but the same terminology carries with it completely different baggage and completely different meaning.
That actually has influences from research trends. Because the whole thing with the default mode network, I agree that the important thing is not the term, it's like how people interpret it. And so in psychiatry, I know that a lot of people think about the default mode network and they instantaneously think about mind wandering. And so some people have actually paid attention to it because of that big connection. And they started looking at what's happening in ADHD. So if this is a mind-wandering network, let's look at it in people with attention deficit. It makes sense, superficial. So it really has influence on the way you hold things. And the same thing with network. I agree that it might be a network, what you're trying to look for, but your terms should be more descriptive of what you see and what you can call it, not what you're trying to do.
And if we used a term that didn't already have meaning, and force people to actually go and look it up, then they would go and they would see how you mean it. They would find that it actually has a definition other than what you infer. But when you give a talk and I talk about functional connectivity and I talk about networks to an electrical engineering group, they know exactly what I mean, and they don't go bother to look it up, and they probably have a complete misunderstanding of what we're talking about.
But I think also this terminological conversation is very, very important, because what happens is that there's sort of a commodification where a splashy study comes out and it says, default mode network is linked to mind wandering, or salience network is linked to anxiety, as if those nodes do that thing. But I think there's still something very important about the fact that mind wandering is associated with default mode network, and that when you look at the architecture of the brain, and the default mode network is these major hubs. And what happens when you're mind wandering, like that very important Buckner review from 2008, where, okay, it's not just task negative, because it's also associated with autobiographical memory, moral decision making, and so on. If you put those things together and then say, okay, what's the core psychological process that underlies those different things? And I think that the terms.
Why does it have to be one?
No. I'm saying that it could be many things, but I'm saying that instead of calling it the mind wandering network, we want to get to something that more accurately defines the function. And I think that one of the functions is self-generated thought or fantasy as opposed to perception. So what all of those things have in common is that my brain is generating something which is somehow not directly linked to what I'm currently perceiving and hearing now. So that could be mind wandering, memory, fantasy, theory of mind, all of those things. So that's part of the problem. So when people take one instance of a larger category and then call the network according to that.
But why do you think that we need to find functional description for network that has been described based on resting state? Why do we need to call it something that means the core function?
Remember, but for all of us to go back, the default network was discovered in the 80s using task-based deactivation. The default network was not discovered in resting state. It's not a network that's active in resting state. It may be, it may not be, right? The default network is a network that is connected, functionally connected at rest, right? And so and I always have to go back to that because a lot of people jumped on board in 2005, and that's their picture. Right? They really haven't thought about it.
But many of these networks are connected at rest, right?
Every region of the brain is connected to some other region of the brain at rest.
No, but the principle that I'm raising right now, which is a larger principle, why would we want to call anything? It's because we're trying to understand how it works, right?
Especially by defining.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Uh,
The problem is
So then,
that,
right.
that by using loaded words or using words that already have definitions for it, you're defining it by them.
But also I think that since the system is very complex, you're going to call things, label things according to the level of organization. Because even if you look at that network or those hubs, you know, you can break it down into the major hubs, and you can look at each hub, you can look at sub-networks. I mean, there's all of that literature.
Sure.
But in terms of calling something, I'm just addressing this issue of when, part of the problem is that when people call something the mind-wandering network, and then it leads people off onto a sort of wrong track because you're identifying a sub-portion of
That's the exact same problem with default. That's the same exact same problem with SSD. It's the exact same problem with malware.
Yeah.
Is that you make people believe that that's what it is.
But somewhere in there.
But this is ontology. I mean, what we're talking about is ontology. I mean, people spend a lot of time thinking about how do we name things so that we all communicate in the same language, and when we call something X, that we all mean the same X, and then we figure out how to do that. There's a lot of issues with that. I mean, if you search, like for example, what I was showing you earlier, yesterday, the semi-librarian, like the resting state hand-curated database that we have. If you want to do a search right now and find every single paper that uses resting state connectivity, or that looks at resting state functional connectivity in some manner, your search time is a paragraph. And then you got to go back and hand call the papers to find the ones that are actually good. Because there's so many different people that call it intrinsic connectivity. There's so many people that call it resting state. There's so many people that call it so many different things. And that's one of the major issues. If I want to find ETI track topography in PubMed, my search term is 2 words, ETI track topography. You know? But anyway, so I mean, I'm enjoying having this conversation. We can continue it. I like everybody. So there are bagels. If y'all would like to have some of those, there's a toaster in there. If y'all want, if you'd like to warm them up, there's a lot of bagels. And then we can, you know, figure out how we want to spend more time today. You know, one of the things we had set up today was for an unconference session. And pretty much the idea is if anybody had anything that they'd like to present or like to talk about, then we could do that. If y'all are interested, we could break up into groups and we could work on things. I mean, it depends on what y'all are interested in doing. We can talk about, figure out those things.
I've done one conference before and they're incredibly fun. I mean, I don't know how you structure it, but could you tell us how you would do it?
What we've done before, I mean, you know, some of the structure that we typically would apply with Brainhack, I haven't been applying here because it's very easy just to talk to everybody. So if you respect. How we did this before is that we would have a sign-up sheet and people could sign up. But mostly what happened is where, you know, for example, a topic would come up over and then somebody that knows something about the topic would be asked to talk about. So, you know, for example, when we were in Leipzig at the very first one, a lot of people were talking about, well, when they do development, they do it on GitHub, and it's a great way to do things, yada, yada. And a lot of people who didn't know about it would like to learn more. So they ended up, you know, Michael Hanke did a demo on GitHub. Or, you know, in other playtimes, you know, the tools to be able to do things. There's a lot of people interested, for example, in DTI, and someone's like, well, I know a little bit about the tools. I can talk about the DTI tools. I don't know if anything's sort of come to that same head here, but if anybody has something that they would like to talk about or to show their results, I support that. But I think one of the major issues is, you know, for today, what would y'all like to get out of the day? Let's try to figure that out and work together to accomplish it. I mean, I got a lot of stuff I could do, and I'd be happy to work with anybody here on a project or do some different things. Or I could sit in the corner right there and do that too. So y'all tell me what y'all want to do. And eat bagels.
Then you can have a conversation.
No, I mean, I don't want to put you in that position, but I would like to know more about your project and processing pipeline you were talking about.
Yeah.
I know it's like, okay, you're the professor again, Or see.
I can, yeah, I mean, if you
So
want
maybe you
to.
want us to, but-
Yeah, I mean, if y'all would like, I can do that. We could talk a little bit about that. I wouldn't have any slides, but I can show you a couple of web pages that would kind of describe it.
And then also, it's right? Like, what's the difference and why you have differences between the HCP food processing your pipeline and yours? So what if it's why you think it's meaningful?
All right. Well, I mean, it's meaningful because it's inherently
I mean,
meaning.
so you.
But that's my bias, right?
Yeah, that's
I definitely got opinions. So if y'all want to hear opinions, I'll give